Take it easy, Joe. Shane's voice was gentle, but it stopped Father in his tracks. I said, I'll take it in. Father whirled to face him. Damn it all, man, do you think I'd let you go alone? Suppose they... He bit down on his own words. He wiped a hand slowly across his face, and he said what I had never heard him say to any man. I'm sorry, he said. I should have known better. He stood there silently watching as Shane gathered up the reins and jumped to the wagon seat. Okay, so Shane is basically saying, I got this. I'm going to take them on. I'm not going to let them intimidate me. Okay, and then Joe was saying, oh, you're right. I need to let you do that, right? It's that code of honor. Okay. I was afraid Father would stop me, so I waited till Shane was driving out of the lane. I ducked behind the barn, around the end of the corral, and hopped into the wagon going past. As I did, I saw the cowboy across the river spin his horse and ride rapidly off in the direction of the ranch house. Shane saw it too, and it seemed to give him a grim amusement. He reached backwards and hauled me over the seat and sat me beside him. You starts like to mix into things. For a moment, I thought he might send me back. Instead, he grinned at me. I'll buy you a jackknife when we hit town. He did, a dandy big one with 2 blades and a corkscrew. After we left the tongs with the blacksmith and found the welding would take nearly an hour, I squatted on the steps on the long porch across the front of Grafton's building, busy whittling, while Shane stepped into the saloon's side and ordered a drink. Will Atke, Grafton's sad, thin-faced clerk and bartender, was behind the bar, and several other men were loafing at one of the tables. It was only a few moments before 2 cowboys came galloping down the road. They slowed to a walk about 50 yards off, and with a show of nonchalance ambled the rest of the way to Grafton's, dismounting and looping their reins over the rail in front. One of them I had seen often, a young fellow everyone called Chris, who had worked with Fletcher several years and was known for a gay manner and reckless courage. The other was new to me, a sallow, pinch-cheeked man, not much older, who looked like he had crowded a lot of hard living into his years. He must have been one of the new hands Fletcher had been bringing into the valley since he got his contract. They paid no attention to me. They stepped softly up on the porch into the window of the saloon part of the building. As they peered through, Chris nodded and jerked his head toward the inside. The new man stiffened. He leaned closer for a better look. Abruptly, he turned clear about and came right down past me and went over to his horse. Chris was startled and hurried after him. They were both so intent they did not realize I was there. The new man was lifting the reins back over his horse's head when Chris caught his arm. What the hell? I'm leaving. Huh? I don't get it. I'm leaving. Now, for good. Hey, listen, do you know that guy? I didn't say that. There ain't nobody can claim I said that. I'm leaving, that's all. You can tell Fletcher. This is a hell of a country up here anyhow. Chris was getting mad. I might have known, he said. Scared, eh? Yellow. Okay, to call someone yellow then was to call them a coward. Color rushed into the new man's sallow face, but he climbed on his horse and swung out from the rail. You can call it that, he said flatly, and started down the road, out of town, out of the valley. Chris was standing still by the rail, shaking his head in wonderment. Hell, he said to himself, I'll brace him myself. In other words, I'll confront Shane myself. I'll take him on my own. He stalked up on the porch into the saloon. I dashed into the store side, over to the opening between the 2 big rooms. I crouched on a box just inside the store where I could hear everything and see most of the other room. It was long and fairly wide. The bar curved out from the opening and ran all the way along the inner wall to the back wall, which closed off a room Grafton used as an office. There was a row of windows on the far side, too high for anyone to look in from outside. The small stairway behind them led up to a sort of balcony across the back with doors opening into several little rooms. Shane was leaning easy with one arm on the bar, his drink in his other hand, when Chris came to perhaps 6 feet away and called for a whiskey bottle and a glass. Chris pretended he did not notice Shane at first and bobbed his head in greeting to the men at the table. They were a pair of mule skinners who made regular trips into the valley, freighting in goods for Grafton and the other shops. Okay, so think about that short story Bargain that we read. See the connection about bringing things in by mule freight? I could have sworn that Shane, studying Chris in his effortless way, was somehow disappointed. Chris waited until he had his whiskey and had gulped a stiff shot. Then he deliberately looked Shane over like he had just spotted him. "Hello, farmer," he said. He said it as if he did not like farmers. Shane regarded him with grave attention. "Speaking to me?" he asked mildly and finished his drink. "Well, hell, there ain't nobody else standing there. Here, have a drink of this." Chris shoved his bottle along the bar. Shane poured himself a generous slug and raised it to his lips. "I'll be damned," flipped Chris. "So you drink whiskey?" Shane tossed off the rest in his glass and set it down. "I've had better," he said, as friendly as could be, "but this will do." Chris slapped his leather chaps with a loud smack. He turned to take in the other men. "Did you hear that? This farmer drinks whiskey. I didn't think these plow-pushing dirt grubbers drank anything stronger than soda pop." "Some of us do," said Shane, friendly as before. Then he was no longer friendly, and his voice was like winter frost. "You've had your fun, and it's mighty young fun. Now run home and tell Fletcher to send up a grown-up man next time." He turned away and sang out to Will Atke, "Do you have any soda pop? I'd like a bottle." Will hesitated, looked kind of funny, and scuttled past me into the storeroom. He came back right away with a bottle of pop that Sam Grafton kept there for us school kids. Chris was standing quiet, not so much mad, I would have said, as puzzled. It was as though they were playing some queer game and he was not sure of the next move. He sucked on his lower lip for a while. Then he snapped his mouth and began to look elaborately around the room, sniffing loudly. "Hey, Will," he called, "what's been happening in here? It smells. That ain't no clean cattleman smell. That's plain dirty barnyard." He stared at Shane. "You, farmer, what are you and Star at raising out there? Pigs?" Shane was just taking hold of the bottle Will had fetched him. His hand closed on it and the knuckles showed white. He moved slowly, almost unwillingly, to face Chris. Every line of his body was as taut as stretched whipcord, and was alive and somehow rich with an immense eagerness. There was that fierce concentration in him, filling him, blazing in his eyes. In that moment, there was nothing in the room for him but that mocking man only a few feet away. The big room was so quiet the stillness fairly hurt. Chris stepped back involuntarily, 1 pace, 2, then pulled up erect, and still nothing happened. The lean muscles along the sides of Shane's jaw were ridged like rock. Then the breath, pent in him, broke the stillness with a soft sound as it left his lungs. He looked away from Chris, past him, over the tops of the swinging doors beyond, over the roof of the shed across the road, on into the distance where the mountains loomed in their own unending loneliness. Quietly he walked, the bottle forgotten in his hand, so close by Chris as to almost brush him, yet apparently not even seeing him, through the doors, and was gone. I heard a sigh of relief near me. Mr. Grafton had come up from somewhere behind me. He was watching Chris with a strange, ironic quirk at his mouth corners. Chris was trying not to look pleased with himself, but he swaggered as he went to the doors and peered over them. "Ha! You saw it, Will," he called over his shoulder. "He walked out on me." Chris pushed up his hat and rolled back on his heels and laughed. With a bottle of soda pop, too. He was still laughing as he went out, and we heard him ride away. "That boy's a fool," Mr. Grafton muttered. Will Atke came sliding over to Mr. Grafton. "I never pegged Shane for a play like that," he said. In other words, he says, "I wouldn't have thought Shane would walk away like that." "Well, he was afraid, Will." "Yeah, that was what was so funny. I would have guessed he could take Chris," meaning he could beat him in a fight. Mr. Grafton looked at Will as he did often, like he was a little sorry for him. "No, Will, he wasn't afraid of Chris. He was afraid of himself." Mr. Grafton was thoughtful and perhaps sad, too. "There's trouble ahead, Will, the worst trouble we've ever had." He noticed me, realizing my presence. "Better skip along, Bob, and find your friend. Do you think he got that bottle for himself?" True enough, Shane had it waiting for me at the blacksmith shop. Cherry pop, the kind I favored most. But I could not enjoy it much. Shane was so silent and stern. He had slipped back into the dark mood that was on him when he first came riding up our road. I did not dare say anything. Only once did he speak to me, and I knew he did not expect me to understand or to answer. "Why should a man be smashed because he has courage and does what he's told? Life's a dirty business, Bob." I could like that boy. And he turned inward again to his own thoughts and stayed the same until we had loaded the tongs in the wagon and were well started home. Then the closer we came, the more cheerful he was. By the time we swung in toward the barn, he was the way I wanted him again, crinkling his eyes at me and gravely joshing me about the Indians I would scalp with my new knife.